A shortage of African American and Spanish-speaking mental health professionals can make it tough for some people of color to find someone to reach out to.
We're always taught, especially as a black man, you only be able to show anger and happiness, and that's it. So you suppress
Nationwide, it's
everything
estimated that just 1% of psychiatrists are African American. Certainly, many professionals are skilled at cutting through cultural differences, but experts say that cultural competency is a serious issue in the mental health field.
I do get what I do. I'd like to see a black female. I'd like to see a black male. I'd like to see someone who's millennial.
Yeah, so we see that often. Sometimes that can just be people's personality. That's who they are. Other times it can be struggling with mental health.
This is The Scene in S.T.E.A.M. with Jade Frederick.
Joseph, or Dr. Smittick, my apologies.
Dr. Frederick.
Thank you so
Soon
much.
to be.
Soon to be, yes. Thank you so much for coming today. I know you're a busy resident, so thank you for making time on your busy schedule to come talk to me.
There's always time for this, truly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, how has overall your, almost finished with your first year, in a couple months you will be.
Yeah.
How have things been going, or was it what you expected?
Yeah, no, I think it's crazy to feel, I don't feel like the year's almost done or halfway done. It's it just flew by, really, and people always say that, like, oh, intern year flies by. But yeah, it really has, and I think expectations-wise, yeah, it's such an imposter syndrome of, like, I'm still a med student, like, how am I, why are people calling me doctor all of a sudden? Like, I'm working with med students underneath me, and it's like I was just there, like, 6 months ago. But it's one of those things where not necessarily fake it till you make it, but you really have to put it on for yourself.
Right.
And assume that role. And, you know more than you think you do oftentimes. And patients respond to that in ways that they feel comforted in your competence. Also, there's still a ton that you don't know, and so it's always, feeling comfortable asking questions and things. But yeah, no, it's a journey.
Absolutely. Well, Joseph, I've always looked up to you. I've known you since we...
Look up to you. The second book just dropped. I don't know if that's okay information on it, but yeah, no.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've known you since Oakwood College. I knew you when you were Mr. Oakwood. Well, it was COVID time, so it was kind of, I didn't know you, but I knew of you. And then coming here, I remember when you came to talk to MAPS, or our pre-med group at Oakwood. I just remember being so inspired by your story about how open you were about the whole pre-med to medical school process, and then even now here in medical school, when you were in medical school, and just starting so many initiatives with our other colleagues, Dr. Me, and all these other things, and still continuing to share your story and inspire me and so many others. But I kind of wanted to get from you, what was your welcome to medical school like? What was it what you expected as a minority, as student come from an HBCU? What was that like?
Yeah, so I'll go back a little bit. So I'm originally from Denver, Colorado. Not the most diverse place when it comes to, representation. And so growing up, going to a private, Christian school, I was one of very few in my class. And I think one of very few in my class in my school. And I think that was difficult for me in some ways, having to combat all the misconceptions and the microaggressions and things.
Right.
And I think that just lit a fire underneath me that I just have to prove them wrong always. And so that really spurred me on to, I have to always be on my game academically and, just all the things. I know people can relate. A lot of us in, higher education can relate to that pressure. And so experiencing that all the way through high school, towards the end I just got tired. I was like, I actually don't need this. I got to a point where, thankfully, in the work that I was doing, I graduated as the first Black valedictorian and class president of my over 100-year-old school. And it got to the point where the numbers were in that I was valedictorian, but they were like, oh, well, the girl who's like 0.2 behind you, she's so close that we think we might do like co-valedictorians this year. We've never done that in the past, but we just feel like, and her dad was, a big like admin at the hospital, and so there's a lot of political stuff.
Yeah.
But I say that to say, just things like that. That was what grounded my experience within PWIs, within spaces. And so going out of that experience, I knew I absolutely wanted to go to an HBCU. And it absolutely turned out to be everything that I thought it would be and more. Going to an HBCU. Anybody who's watching this, if you're prior to, starting college, go to an HBCU. Do it. Yeah, but no, it just filled me and healed so many parts of me that I didn't know were broken. It inspired me in ways that I didn't know I could be inspired. Being one of few in, primarily white spaces, they'll applaud you for a lot of things. Oh, wow, you speak so well. Oh, wow, you do X, Y, and Z. Wow. And getting to an HBCU, it was like, okay, that's nice.
Yeah.
There's 10 more of us who can also do X, Y, and Z. And so it's like, wow, like there was a new level of excellence.
Right.
And I think that caused me to grow in ways that I wouldn't have if I had gone to a PWI. So then transitioning into medical school, I had gone to a HBCU for 4 years. This was like 2018, 2019.
Right.
Black Panther had come out. Like I was just in my era. And transitioning into medical school, I was like, all right, like I already know what this is gonna be. Going back to a PWI, and this is kind of, as I was graduating from Oakwood, it was in 2020. So all of a sudden everybody is like hip to the issues.
Right.
Like, oh wow, like yes, Black people are oppressed. Like, oh my gosh. People from high school who had said crazy things to me our whole education were like going to protests and things, and I was like, okay, wow, like welcome to the fight. So, with that coming to Loma Linda, I think my expectations were very low. It being a PWI, but also being a PWI of faith, which oftentimes, unfortunately, can be no racism, like racism that's backed by faith. And so my expectations coming in were very, very low, but I was pleasantly surprised at just the big push when it came to curriculum-wise. Like when we teach medicine, when we teach, MSK and different rashes and skin presentations, we're going to make sure that we also teach this in color, right? On darker skins and things. When we talk about renal function, we're going to talk about the history of how it's been skewed to, have this one representation for Black people, and this is how, kidney function is tested in them versus in the rest of the population, and the misconceptions that that's based on. And so them acknowledging those things, and also, being very intentional about having DEI groups and, pipeline programs. I was like, okay, like if my school is ready to do this work, this is things that I've already been passionate about. If my school is ready to do this work, these are things that I've always been passionate about, so let's get to it. Now with that, I think that was something that administration was pushing and was ready for. There's always that disconnect with your counterparts, with students that you're beside who, aren't necessarily as passionate or don't see the rationale for these things.
Right.
And so I think we saw a lot of tension there with students who many times felt like, why are some of these people here? these black students are taking seats that would have gone to other students who had better test scores. Those are some of the things we heard like our classmates say coming in. And then, you know, getting on the wards with certain attendings in the ways that sometimes they can talk about patients of color or can talk about issues, you know, sometimes viewing patients as lazy or non-compliant without acknowledging the structural issues that are at play. And so, yeah, I think as an institution, I was very proud of the direction that administration was going, but there's always that pushback and lag when it comes to the rest of the people who are subject under that.
Right.
So I'd say that kind of colored the beginning of my med school journey.
Yeah. Good and bad, or good and like still places for growth for sure.
Plenty of places for growth, and I think that's a space that myself and a lot of my other black students who, you know, I was with, I think a lot of us still thrived in that space of, hey, like we have the support from up here, you know, everybody else who's on the side who has things to say, we can push past that. Yeah.
I'm glad that you kind of went back and gave some background, because even like the two valedictorians thing, and someone who also went to PWI before Oakwood, it's like crazy. You're just like, it's one thing to know that microaggressions are happening and you can see that certain people have certain ideas about you, but another thing to be like, I know this is unfair, or I know this is, you're skewing things to look one way or to put me in a lesser light, and another thing to have it like blatantly in your face and for someone to say that, and then and then going to Oakwood after that. It was such a freeing time, or just so, my mom would always say, like, she thinks, like, every, like, black kid growing up or black student growing up should have a time where they're just surrounded by black excellence. And, like, I completely agree, and I think we both had that experience at Oakwood where there was black excellence all around us, and like you said, like, you know, you're doing the thing and they're also doing the thing.
Yeah. It's a wonderful incubator for what is possible when you grow up in a society that constantly bombards you saying what you cannot be and who you are not. Being in an HBCU is such a wonderful incubator, especially at that age where you're coming to understand yourself and figuring out, you know, long-term, what do I want to do to be in that cocoon of safety and also encouragement and inspiration. Is just, I want that for everybody.
Absolutely. Yeah, and then coming to Loma Linda, he said also, I really appreciated the things that they're doing to make their classes more inclusive, MSK and Durham and all these things. But yeah, you definitely see that pushback also. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? You said students were saying that, like, would they tell you that to your face, or you just heard it, like, through the grapevine?
No, there were, like, anonymous, because our year was also the year that they were changing the curriculum to a system-based curriculum. So we were the first year for that. And so with every lecture and, you know, lecture thread that they were doing, they also always solicited feedback. And so it could come in anonymous forms and things, and seeing that in some of those anonymous feedback, oh, you know, why are we spending so much time learning about, you know, oppression, and these factors don't make sense as far as when it comes to health disparities. On a separate occasion, I think it was one of our like spiritual care electives, selectives, and as part of that we had to read just very detailed accounts of experiences of families during the Jim Crow era in the South. And one of our counterparts was so upset at one of our classes and was like, yeah, like, this was so graphic, you know, I don't know why me and my wife had to read this. Him and his wife were both in our class. I don't know why me and my wife had to read this, like, this shouldn't be part of our curriculum. And our teacher, like, apologized and kind of stepped back. And it was like, well, no, don't apologize for us reading that. Like, if you're disgusted reading it, imagine what it's like living that or being the descendant of people who lived that and that trauma being passed down and never really being reconciled. And that being also baked into the healthcare system and how we view patients of color. And so, yeah, it was just things like that where there's this disconnect of, so, and then the incident with, people taking our seats, it was in it was some meeting that they were having. I think it was a curriculum committee or something, where one of the students on the committee had essentially voiced frustration, and it got out to the rest of the class that was said. And so it was things like that were just like, okay, we know. Even though we have support at the top, we also know who's around us and their intentions sometimes. So
it's a lot to deal with. I think on one end you're like, I want you to say these things so I know where I stand with you. But it's still like shocking to hear. And like even then when I feel like it was so prevalent and people were like finally kind of almost waking up and seeing like, oh, these things are still problems. And that's like people are still saying those things. And now it's definitely not something that's gone away. It's even more so now, and it's still issues. But I think it's good that the faculty and the higher ups have still made it important to talk about, to include in the curriculum, despite pushback from people who may not be as open-minded. So and I think you guys had a lot to do with it. Like you. Jessica, Janelle, all of you started Dr. Me. I want to talk with you about that as well, because I also think, one, kudos to you guys for starting it and bringing that to life. Also, kudos to the school for being open to it and providing a space for that to happen. But I did want you to talk a little bit about it, what kind of led to it, and how was the process of creating it, and how would you kind of hope it continues?
Yeah. Well, I can't take credit, and even our class and cohort can't necessarily take credit without giving homage to those who came before us, Christoph and Dr. DeShields, and those who really kind of set the foundation of Project Next, which is a program that works within public schools in San Bernardino who have disproportionately lower test scores compared to a lot of the other schools in the county. And so really with their initiatives of, hey, we need to be going into those schools. It doesn't make sense for, us to be, as accomplished as we are in higher education, studying medicine, and be right down the street from children, who have lower test scores than a lot of their peers. And so them having the initiative to go out into those schools is kind of what set the background or the framework for what myself, Janelle, Chantal, CJ, Jessica, and Marissa all came to do, which was Chantal was over Project Next at that time, and was really, we were doing kind of little science fairs and things going, once quarterly or once monthly, but it was really a burden on her heart of like, how can we make this more real for these kids?
Right.
It's one thing we're coming into your classroom, but like, we want you to see this. Like, we want you to be in an immersive experience that really makes this come alive for you. And so kind of brainstorming on how do we bring these kids on our campus, right? Like, how do we put something together where the kids get to almost have a simulation of what it's like to be a med student or to go to med school for a day, but it be at a level that's palatable for, a 6th grader, 7th grader. And so kind of brainstorming together, what would that look like? What kind of activities are most engaging within that experience? And as, kind of developing the program came together, when it comes to the name Dr. Me was really based in like, we want them as kids to see oh, I see doctors there, I see this is Dr. So-and-so. We want you to look in the mirror and see Dr. Me. Like, this is something that I'm able to do. And there's a saying that if you see it, you can be it. And for a lot of these kids, that may not be an opportunity that they get to see. I think for my experience, right, growing up in Denver, I didn't know many doctors at all. I definitely didn't know many black doctors. I think there was maybe one in my entire church. And so it felt like something that was possible, kind of, because I saw it. And wanting to recreate that for these kids, you know, they may see other career paths, they may see other journeys, and now we're adding to, hey, and also being a physician is something that is well within your reach. And so, yeah, when it came to developing Dr. Me, it was so rapid. Kudos to that team, really. I was part of the team, but I want to say Janelle and Jessica and Chantal and Marissa and CJ, just the way their minds work are insane. The planning that went into it, the detail, coming up with the schedule for the kids, the intentionality in making sure that the kids get to take pictures in white coats on Polaroids that they get to take home, so that this is something that lives with them. They have things to take back. The merch, the t-shirts, it's just, it's amazing. And then longitudinally getting to see, because we live on data, right, and seeing those things, so being able to track longitudinally kids who are coming back to this program year after year, and how their attitudes change when it comes to, in year one, how did you feel about, is medicine something you're interested in? Do you feel like you're capable of doing something like this? And seeing progressively over the years how some of that is changing for kids. Because it's nice to pat ourselves on the back, like, oh, we did that, you know, we put this program together, we get to take pictures, look at what we did. But it doesn't matter if it's not being internalized by the kids, and getting to see that data and track that over years is huge. So, yeah.
No, I have experienced firsthand, like, what a huge endeavor it is, what a huge undertaking it is. And you guys, like, starting it and doing it, like, in your second year, every time I think about it, I was just trying to stay above water second year.
It's just a blur. I don't even remember that time. I think it was just the excitement of like what this could be and what this could look like, and just seeing the kids' faces. You know, when you go, I'm sure you know, going to the school and doing the science fairs and things, just seeing the engagement and
it's amazing.
It doesn't hit for every kid, and that's, you know, sometimes it's just not a path that they're interested in, or, you know, we didn't make it as relevant or as engaging as it could be. But for those kids that it does click with, it's like, oh wow, like, how can I give you more of this? How can I keep feeding you along this path? And I think that is what drove us as we were envisioning this program, even in the heat of second year, preparing for step one.
Yeah, for sure. No, going to the school and just, like, seeing them excited, and when they come to Linda, and then they're putting on the white coat, and then they're doing the simulation, they're going around to each of the stations, like, it's just so exciting, and you can definitely feel, even though they're trying to act cool.
Oh, they do. It's always, every year, I love is, you know, a couple kids. Usually it's some of the, like, 8th grade boys, 7th, 8th grade boys who are, you know, kind of tough. Oh, I don't know if I want to see that. And by the end, you know, they're doing chest compressions during our simulation. They're, like, engaged in things. And so, So, there's nothing like it, truly.
And I remember, like, so when you did the HNP presentation, and you were co-director, which, and you talk about the different programs, talk about Operation X2, and I just remember being like, I have to be part of that. So, it's just always been, like, such an inspiration. I think really, that it really has had an impact on the kids, which, you know, is, like, the whole goal.
And it's been such a blessing to have you and others kind of lead on that charge, because I think it can be very daunting to, wow, like, I didn't create this project, like, this is something that's I'm inheriting, like, I don't know if I can do this right, but to have people who, you know, really assume the role and carry on the legacy it's more than I could have dreamed. We, you know, we were really taking a gamble and didn't know if Dr. Me would be something that would last for several years after we were gone. And so it's awesome.
Yeah. Yes. It's important. I'm glad we can continue the torch as best we can. But, you know, we can never live up to the OGs. But
you do it every day. You surpass us.
But yeah, and then something you said earlier, it was like you can't, or, you know, the saying that you can't be what you can't see. And I know for you, like, going into psych, one, I can't think of, like, someone, especially that's more suitable for you. Like, you're such a fun presence, Joseph. I would want to be your patient.
I'm in tears. I'm glad that I can project that. Inside, it's not always the calmness, but I'm glad that's what you received. Yeah.
And just, I mean, I think all our friends can agree, but I think, like I said before, you guys were a huge inspiration to my year and my class growing up, or getting up now to where we are. Now it's 4th years. But how was that kind of process, choosing psych and then the math process as well? How did kind of your experience in med school lead you to psych?
Ooh. Okay, I'll try and be brief because I feel like I've been answering so long. So coming into med school, I was like set on emergency medicine. I was like, I think from a health disparities perspective, that's always been a passion of mine, and recognizing that oftentimes people who don't have access to healthcare, who don't have access to outpatient follow-up and things, the emergency room ends up being their primary care. And I think I wanted to be on the interface of what that can look like. And I think along my journey in med school, kind of just seeing, as we go through and do our rotations, we only get to see our patients once, really. Yeah, you're there when they're hospitalized, you see them, you get them better, you go on to your next rotation, you know, these aren't people that you follow up with long term. And I just recognized a deep need. It was like, oh no, I need continuity. Like, after I get you better, I want to see you again. Like, how was your life after you broke your leg, or after we did, and so recognizing that, I think I realized like emergency medicine is good. It's a wonderful specialty. And also for me, I need that continuity. I need to have longitudinal relationships with people. And so that kind of jarred my search. Okay, like what other specialties would be of interest to me? And just continually through my rotations, there was just a theme of I loved hearing people's stories. And I think I, did a lot of the kind of more, what would I describe it as? I guess like per se with a patient with diabetes, we're talking about your blood sugar numbers, and we're talking about, the follow-ups that you need to have, your diet and things. I would have that conversation, but what would really, fill my cup after that conversation is, okay, like, but how are you doing, right? Like, how are you processing this diagnosis? How has this changed your view of yourself? How has this changed, contextually your interactions with your family? Do you feel like you have the self-efficacy that you even need to deal with this diagnosis? And it was those conversations that I was like, yeah, like that's what I really want to be doing. And so I think that's when I don't think I pieced it all together in the beginning of like, oh, that's what I really enjoy. But it was during my transition into 3rd year, pediatrics was my first rotation. I did not do very hot at all. Peds took me out. And so, yeah, I had to go back and redo that rotation. And I think, just in the med school journey, the level of perfectionism that we all have and high expectations of ourselves, I think that really did a lot to me. Kind of hit me hard, and, family-wise, there were other things going on, had some deaths in the family. And so that was one of my main encounters where it's like, hey, I'm seeking therapy. And I think from that experience, just seeing, number one, like, within my family, getting started on medications. I think I started on ADHD medications, and like how they viewed that, and it was so controversial amongst my aunts and uncles. And seeing that like mental health within at large is stigmatized, but especially within our communities, within Black and brown communities, within immigrant communities, within communities of faith. And to be at the intersection of so many of those communities, I think I really found a space where it's like, oh, this is the space where I can really have a lot of impact. Because I think oftentimes it can be, there's studies everywhere that will say, there's often better patient outcomes when there's physician-patient concordance, whether that be racially, ethnically, what have you. And so it can come across a lot differently when you're having someone who looks like you explain to you, hey, like you might have ADHD, or tell me about what your understanding is of depression, from someone who comes from a community that can have a complex view and relationship with those concepts. And so I think coming out of that, realizing that, hey, like I love talking to people, I love having these longitudinal relationships, and viewing mental health from a perspective of communities that can also have a complicated relationship with those two things, was like, yeah, this is the specialty I need to go into. And so Match Day, I applied to programs. I applied very broadly after, my struggles with pediatrics and repeating rotations. And I think getting to be in the application process and interviewing was such a flipped experience. I think your whole medical school journey, you just fight, like, please take me in, please accept me, like, please pass me, please give me good evals. And I think in the interview process, it was my first time being in a space where, like, okay, like, what can we do to get you to our program? Like, what are you looking for? What can we? And I was like, what? Like, okay, well, this is new. Not sure what me. And so I think that process also kind of like reaffirmed the calling of like, this is something that's important, not just to me, but programs and systems and different groups within medicine are recognizing that this is also important. And so during the process of Match, I was so very excited to get to stay in Southern California and continue to work within the same communities that I built Dr. Me in. And ultimately child and adolescent psychiatry is kind of the field I want to go into. And so getting to continue to do this work in the community that I've been working with for the past 6 years is amazing.
That's awesome, and I'm so happy for you, Joseph. I did when I was on my secretation, I was at the clinic with you a couple of days, and it's like, wow, you're just so good at this. But like you said, it's just so important, especially in Black and brown communities. Like, how do you tell your parents you're depressed when they tell you stories growing up? Like, I had to walk past the street, say hi to Granny, and
barefoot
across through the woods, and you're what? But it's so important. So.
Yeah, and it's like you were probably depressed too.
Right.
That's what we need to talk about.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but Joseph, I could talk to you all day, but it was so good talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of The Scene in STEAM. I'm Jade. If you'd like to help out students studying science, technology, engineering, art, and math, please check out the links below. And I hope you can join us for the next episode.